Stuffing up your pacing and throwing away months of hard training because you took the guess and go approach to your race sucks. Despite having a supercomputer on our wrist, I still see runners making the same old mistake. To help you nail your next race and maximize your performance potential, I'll walk you through my pacing triad method, and I'll also share my go-to watch display setup so that I'm always getting the data I need when I'm out racing. All right, so to get on the same page, I'm going to use the term metrics, but with my Kiwi accent, it's probably going to sound a little like meat trucks. Anyway, metrics refer to the different data streams that we're getting from our device. Most important to this discussion is going to be pace, power, and heart rate. We'll also throw in rating of perceived exertion, which the whole system sits on top of, as I'll explain later. But regardless of what anyone's told you, one metric is not solely better than another one. Each has its pros and cons in different situations, which led me to develop the pacing triad method in the first place. I go into more about the pace, power, heart rate relationship in my free mini courses, which you can get with the downloads that are in the description. So make sure you check those out if you want to learn a bit more. When we're looking at my triad system, we have the nested triangle where RPE sits in the center, surrounded by pace, power, and heart rate. RPE sits in the center because within our pacing triad, it's a proxy for the brain, and the brain ultimately controls our performance. Right now, looking at the triad, it has heart rate at the top as the primary. But the beauty of the system is that depending on where you are in the race or the type of race you're doing, you can rotate the triad to alter the primary controlling metric without neglecting the other metrics, data streams, and inputs that we need out when we're running. So I realize this does sound like a lot to absorb in the middle of a race, so I'll walk you through an example for a marathon runner. Then I'll share my watch setup to make it super easy for you to get all the info you need when you're out on the course. So at the start of a marathon, or really any race over an hour, for the first about 10 minutes, pace is going to sit at the top of the triad. You'll have a time in mind, and whether you've made it up or you've used my system to predict your performance, you know that going faster than that pace is too fast. If you want to run a 3:30 marathon, there's no point running 10 seconds faster than you need because you know you'll blow up. Therefore, the initial 10 minutes is all about controlling yourself through what I call the hype phase of the race, where everyone is seemingly sprinting off into the distance. Then once we're past that hype phase, we can rotate the triangle so that heart rate is sitting in the primary controller. While you thought that a 5-minute K or an 8-minute mile was the target, now looking at your heart rate being 10 beats higher than you initially planned suggests that you probably need to slow down. But before we do, we can look at the bottom of the triangle. We've already looked at pace, so then RPE, yeah, I feel great. And we can look at power. Yeah, that confirms that we are working a little harder than we initially planned, potentially because we're into a headwind or we're going up a slight incline. So while pace is good, RPE is good, power and heart rate are telling us that we're working too hard, and it's about 10 minutes into a 3-hour run, so we probably need to adjust down. Conversely, if your heart rate's high, but pace and power are on or just below your targets, and you're feeling good, then you know something isn't quite right with heart rate, and we can make an informed decision about what to do, either listening to heart rate or temporarily shifting one of the other metrics to the primary position and then adjusting our effort accordingly. What we're trying to do with this triad method is never rely solely on one data source. So we're always able to make the best decision within the race. This helps both in the race itself, but also post-race analysis when we're looking at our performance because we know why we made a particular decision, good or bad, during the race, and so we can adjust our decision-making processes and pacing strategies moving forward. There's no more, I felt good, so I just went for it. But is this a foolproof method? No, obviously not. My triad method relies heavily on you knowing your numbers, so that when you see a heart rate of 163 BPM at an hour and a half into the race, you know that that's too high and you should slow down. You also need to listen to the data. I've definitely been at fault of this. So when your numbers are high, but you feel great, and you throw caution to the wind, that great feeling, it's not going to last forever. So you need the data to keep you in check, and using multiple sources is just a better means of doing this. For some people, this is going to sound like very intense or excessive, but from my experience, and the experience of those that I've worked with one-on-one, setting the system up, you do rely heavily on your watch for the first 30 minutes of the race. And then during, maybe the more particularly challenging parts of the course, like an uphill, really windy area, other than that, you're pretty much just locked in, running based off a feel and using your watch to confirm what you already know. How do we absorb all this information while we're out on the course without getting overwhelmed? I'm going to share my go-to watch setup, and then I'll also share a couple of options for the visually challenged, because all those data screens all on one can be a little hard to read for some. All right, so at the top, I've got real-time running power coming from Stride. So this is my output metric for what I'm doing right now. How hard am I working right now? I get a quick reference of that. If you're not using running power, then that would be pace for you, something real time that you're getting right now. On the second row, I've got time and lap pace. Time's obvious, but lap pace has a little bit more nuance to it. I'll typically have laps set to 3 to 5K, which is about 15, 20 minutes. And I prefer these longer laps for two reasons. It smooths the race out and stops me being overly reactive to fast or slow K or mile splits. Even the fastest courses have fast and slow sections. So then number two, I can get a better gauge on how I'm doing within the particular sections of a race on average, which is what I mean by smoothing things out. If you have got short splits on, like the 1K, 1 mile, and then like a real-time pace, then you could have a couple of faster splits, not think much of it, but on average, when you see you're almost a minute ahead over 5K, it's a little more obvious that you're overdoing it, which then leads me into my heart rate. For my heart rate row, I have real-time heart rate, which is my input metric for how hard my body is working right now. I can compare that to my real-time power, so I can get a good output, input, real time. Then I've got that lap average heart rate. So using those laps of around 15 to 20 minutes, I'm able to look at my lap heart rate besides real time, because too many times I've looked down and selectively ignored when my heart rate has been just on my target or 1 to 2 beats above, not realizing until after the race when I've analyzed it that I ran the whole first half at a heart rate that was too high. So to counteract this, I've added lap heart rate. So for that overall 5K, I can see more blatantly that my heart rate on average is too high. And this is especially helpful when you have hilly courses or a bit of headwind and you have more fluctuations in your heart rate and you think it's okay to go a little bit above because I'm going to go a little bit down, but on average, what does that look like? And finally, I have distance, which is obvious. Time and distance aren't really necessary, but it helps manage nutrition, aid stations, and overall pacing if you have faster or slower parts of the course or you're planning a negative split. You just kind of know where you are in relation to the overall race. All right, if you're thinking, Dr. Will, I can hardly see the time on my watch, let alone 50 million moving numbers I hear. So my advice for those hard of sight is to use 2 metrics per screen, just top and bottom, and aim to pair them so you're getting the real time and the lap average like I talked about. There'll be something like real time power, so you have a measure of how hard you're working right now, and then you'd have your lap pace. You get a reference of where you were relative to what kind of finish time you were hoping to achieve. But if you didn't want any reference of outcome, then you could have lap power. So you got power and lap power. Likewise, if it's a particularly flat course or you're not using running power at all, you could have pace as the real time and then average pace. You can just see how those are correlating based on what you're seeing real time based on what was happening on average. And as I went over before, you want heart rate and lap heart rate, and then you can have time and distance. Everything else you can kind of just do whatever. If that all sounds good, but you have no idea what your numbers are and you want to find them for your next race or training session, then check out this video, this one, where I break down my system for predicting your race pace. Or you could just book in a chat with me and I'll walk you through getting your numbers dialed. All right, all the best with your training and I'll catch you on the next one.